Hi, it's Elise here at Bowman Library with a whole new teen book spotlight. So, this week we are exploring one of my favorite topics. If you watch enough of these, you may be able to guess what it is. You may not, but I'll tell you what it is anyways. We are exploring some nonfiction titles. I love nonfiction. I feel like sometimes nonfiction gets a bad rap. And it's not like how it used to be. Some of the best books I have ever read that I talk about, share with people, are nonfiction. I especially love nonfiction that talks about a topic, a time period, an individual, something that's either from our past or even today that we need to know more of. Like, why wasn't this talked about more? Why wasn't this taught to us in school? Why aren't we hearing about this? What can we take from this? So we have 6 amazing nonfiction titles that we're going to take a look at. So let's get started. Our first one is The Poisoner's Handbook. Love this one. This one wraps in some history, some science, some true crime. Oh yeah, all different things. Okay, so this goes all the way back to the Jazz Age. We're back in the 1920s, and it was at that time one of the most popular, if not the most popular method for committing murder was poison. That's because it was basically undetectable. At that time, there were no tests for different types of poisons. And a lot of times when someone was poisoned, and if they died from it, it almost, like, most of the time looked like natural causes. So then, it wasn't really like explored, examined by police, by anyone. So fast forward 1920s, as 1920s go into the 1930s, there's this guy whose name is Charles Norris, and he is named the chief medical examiner for New York City. He's the first person to ever hold this office, this person who's in charge of exploring what happens with dead bodies. Now, he decides it's his job to do something about this crazy murder epidemic with poisons. So through this, also because of him, we have the birth of forensic medicine, which we do take for granted today. Now, what I love about this book is each chapter is named for a different type of poison. It starts by featuring an actual true crime that dealt with that poison, and then it goes through how the crime was solved and how the different tests for those poisons were made, determined, all that type of stuff. It was so eye-opening. I know we take a lot of forensics for granted today. This is how this all gets started, The Poisoner's Handbook. The Great American Dust Bowl, this graphic novel, which is nonfiction because graphic novels can be nonfiction, it will take you back to the 1930s when the middle of the United States, the plains, okay, literally the middle, it's in one of the worst droughts in the history of the world. It leads to these horrific dust storms because, again, there's no plants, there's no trees, it's just dust. So there's these dust storms, there's a lack of growing food, cattle starts to die because there's nothing for them to eat. It's one thing to read about this time in history or to like have someone tell you this happened, but it's another thing to see it visually all together, and that's what this graphic novel does. You will see how individuals and families were impacted. I mean, like, there's incredible illustrations. Don Brown does this amazing job. He also has a number of other nonfiction graphic novels I recommend as well. His newest one is In the Shadows of the Fallen Towers, which deals with 9/11. Highly recommend any of his. This one, again, is so visually impactful that it's one thing to say there was a Dust Bowl, it's another thing to actually see it. The Great American Dust Bowl. Hunting the Unabomber. Okay, so you may have heard of the Unabomber or the Unabomber case, or maybe you haven't. If you have, this is a great read. If you haven't, this will take you through everything you need to know. So it goes back to the 1980s, okay? That's when the Unabomber case first starts. And there's these random bombings that are happening by this individual, this group. At the time they thought it was a group, it does currently be an individual, that goes by the Unabomber. Now, this case starts in the 80s, it goes into the 1990s. You will get the lead up, you'll get the beginning, the middle, the end, the things that are still being impacted today by this case. And this bombing spree the country had never dealt with anything like this before. It put the country on such high alert, they were stressed. No one knew where the next one was going to come, when it was going to come, what it was going to target. It targeted homes, the businesses, the airlines, yeah. Now, you may have seen some stuff, read some stuff about this crime spree. Netflix has a series that's out, but this is a worthwhile read. The author also has one called Hunting Charles Manson, which is just as well done as Hunting the Unabomber, but for something that you could even ask, you know, depending on how old you are, ask someone about this, they could totally talk to you about it. You can even then be a little expert. Hunting the Unabomber. Symphony for the City of the Dead. Okay, just picture this for a second. Okay, we know stuff about World War II. Okay, if you're like me, you know kind of what you were told in history class, which is, you know, a very Americanized version of what happened during World War II. You may have seen movies about it. You may have seen maybe some TV shows. This gets into a battle for a city that was pretty intense, that unfortunately we don't know a lot about here, or are we told or shared a lot about. This is an incredibly eye-opening book. So it's September 1941, and this is when Hitler decides he's going to send his army into Russia, and they decide they are going to try to siege as much of the Soviet Union, Russia, as they possibly can, and they surround the city that's called Leningrad. So what goes from there is this book is based on some stuff that happened. Not only do you learn about the generalities of what happened as the city was bombed, there was starvation. I mean, they even started to turn to cannibalism. That's how like desperate they were to eat. More than 1 million people will eventually end up dying through this siege, in which people, in order to not give up hope, enters in Dmitri Shostakovich. Now, Dmitri here is a composer. He was living in Leningrad, and as the Nazis surround this city and no one can come in or out, they're facing this winter that's going to be extremely brutal. Dmitri decides that he wants to bring people hope, and he gathers people together that can play musical instruments, and he writes this symphony. I mean, this really happened. He writes this symphony in the middle of this standoff, and this symphony is meant to bring people hope, power, and to rally people not to give in to the Nazis. And yeah, like this book was so incredibly eye-opening for a number of different reasons, not only from what actually happened during this siege, in which the Nazis were not victorious, the Russian people end up like pushing them off, but what would you do if you found yourself in this situation? What would you do to try to keep hope alive? Symphony for the City of the Dead. America's Game, the NFL at 100. Okay, if you're a sports fan, more specifically a football fan, this is an amazing read. So it's by Jerry Rice. I mean, like, if you're a football fan, you know the great wide receiver Jerry Rice. Now, this takes you back to the history of the NFL. It tells it, though, through stories that feature the fiercest rivalries throughout history, the most competitive games, the closest competitions, some of the most unforgettable players. Some maybe you've heard of, others, though, this will be your first time being introduced to them, and it will change your look at the game. Now, this book is divided into 4 sections, 25-year increments in each one, and it each features an all-star team with players and teams for that period, as well as top games. So you can jump around if you choose to. I love reading about the history of football because it is so incredible how we've gotten from point A to where we are at point B, and yeah. It is a little hefty, so that's why, again, it's meant that if you want to jump around, you can jump around from different decades, so on. But again, if you're a sports fan, America's Game. And our last one is The Rise and Fall of Charles Lindbergh. Now, I will tell you this. before I read this book, the only thing I really knew of Charles Lindbergh was that he was a famous pilot. I mean, he was the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean, and he became this international hero that could do no wrong. And then the other thing I knew was that his baby was kidnapped one evening, which led to this massive manhunt, this incredible mystery. Even some people to this day, they don't think the mystery is actually solved. Yeah, that's all I really knew. I will tell you this, there is so much more to this man than what you probably think. Now, he was considered again to be an American hero, and you would not believe some of the stuff that you learn about for him. And again, everyone's entitled to their own opinions, I will say that, but this is complete with him, Charles Lindbergh, who was our American hero. He went to Berlin, he met with Hitler, he considered himself to be a Nazi, to even having multiple families throughout America and Europe. Now, this biography is incredibly eye-opening, and one thing it made me do was, let's fast forward 70 years, to today, from when he was this amazing hero. If we knew what we knew now then, would he still have been considered the person he was? By Candace Fleming, an amazing author. It's incredibly well researched. If you want a thought-provoking, not just biography, but a look at an individual in history and what makes someone a hero, an incredible individual, or maybe changes opinions, highly recommend The Rise and Falls of Charles Lindbergh. So these are just 6 of the books we have here that are incredible nonfiction. I encourage you to come out, check out one of these, or we have a ton more nonfiction. So we can totally help you find whatever that perfect book is you're looking to maybe read when you have some days off over your break, or to kick off the start of your new year and your new reading challenge. So come on out, we'll help you find whatever you need. I hope you have an amazing week, and I hope you tune back next time for a whole new Teen Book Spotlight.